afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. The key to making a good decision is having good information. So when it comes to making decisions about Vermont's environment, scientists and policymakers need accurate and unbiased information. They get that information from one of the most expansive records of forest health, air, soil, and water quality data in the region. Across the Fence's Rebecca Gollin explains.
9424, 9423, 9422.
Students from the University of Vermont are measuring the vitals of this forest in Underhill. The checkup is part of an annual survey of forest health in Vermont.
We can definitely tell what's happening with the trees, at least short term, by looking at last year's data compared to this year's data.
The students are interns for the Vermont Monitoring Cooperative, or VMC. VMC is a partnership of the state of Vermont, the USDA Forest Service, and UVM. The group collects and maintains data about the conditions of Vermont's forests.
We take health and we take the diameter at breast height, DBH, and then we also do some qualitative assessments of the trees to measure their health, like their vigor, the amount of dieback, so the amount of growth that didn't continue from last year, and transparency of the foliage. And we also do some assessments of the actual seedlings that are growing to tell what's regenerating, what's successful at the plot, what likes growing there and what doesn't.
VMC maintains a network of 42 forest monitoring plots around the state, including 17 at Mount Mansfield. Their focus on forest health means taking a close look at anything that might affect the ecosystem.
We look at air, water, wildlife, and then the actual trees for figuring out what the state of the Vermont forest is.
Jim Duncan is a researcher and analyst at the VMC. The information the group has collected provides a detailed look at forest health over the years.
While we do focus on the forests of Vermont, we're looking at kind of the regional context of that. And in general, Vermont's 80% forested, so most of the state is our playground, and we really get to think about the air, water, forests around the state.
VMC was created in 1990 when it became clear that various researchers around the state were working on the same types of projects. The idea was to gather and catalog data about forest ecosystems in Vermont and create an accessible information hub for scientists around the state and region.
It was born out of the idea that there's people who are all trying to kind of do the same thing, and they didn't know that each other were working on the same projects. So the catalog kind of sprung from that, but it's become really taken on a life of its own as a way to get data out there for people. And often we just also provide a home for data that has no home.
Some of their studies can take quite a while, including a couple of soil monitoring sites that are part of a 200-year survey of soil chemistry and health.
Sugar Maple Live.
Sugar Maple Live.
Yellow Birch Live.
Yellow Birch Live, another one.
Tracking the same forest plots every year helps to identify any pest outbreaks and diseases in the short term. But in the long term, the data that VMC collects is crucial for getting a big picture view of what's going on in Vermont's forests.
More than anything, I think that those monitoring frameworks provide the way to ask the next question, right? 20 years ago, people weren't really thinking about climate change in the same way. Without the monitoring data that we've been collecting for 20 years, you'd have to wait another 20 to start answering those climate change questions.
3 more red maple.
What I'm doing is looking at the down woody debris. So how many branches have fallen, what size they are, how many there are on the ground, that sort of thing, to sort of paint a picture both of how much carbon there is in the forest, and in addition, what kind of structure there is for different wildlife, like birds and that sort of thing.
Josh Hallman is a forest health specialist with the state. He's here to help the VMC crew collect data.
It's important to track these changes annually. A lot can change year to year, but more importantly, these are long-term plots. And so the more data that we can collect year after year, it builds a richer data set, and it can inform us a lot more clearly about what changes are occurring in the environment and within our forests here as well.
To get the full picture of forest health, the group monitors different aspects of air and water quality as well, maintaining a number of testing stations around the state.
We have several programs that focus in different places. We have some intensive sites where we try to co-locate a lot of different monitoring programs so that you can kind of monitor the status of the ecosystem and its response across a number of different variables, from the soils to the water to the trees and the wildlife responses.
One of those intensive sites is right here in Underhill, where a field full of air quality monitoring instruments sits just down the road from the forest plots.
We have a couple of different rain gauges. We have the chandelier rain gauge over there, which is digital.
As an air quality technician for VMC, Mim Pendleton collects samples and maintains the many instruments used here.
We have precipitation measurements, and then we have chemical analysis of the samples. So if you know how much rain or how much air you've sucked through a filter pack, you know what the volume is, and from that you can know what the total deposition in a place is and the concentration. So those deposition and concentration measurements are what scientists look at to, see if there's going to be some impact on like aquatic water bodies or vegetation or whatever.
Pendleton has seen positive changes over the years, such as vast improvements in acid rain after federal legislation in the 1980s.
The pH of rain back then was in the low 4s, sometimes high 3s, which is really acid, and now it's in the 5s. So much less acid, and pH, the higher the number, the less acidity. Plus it's a logarithmic thing, so it's not like, oh, it's only 2 times less acid. It's more like it's 20 times less acid. It's a different order of magnitude.
According to the data, Vermont's forest health is good right now.
In general, the forests are pretty resilient here, and they've recovered a lot since the clearing in the 1800s. So my perspective is, on the whole, we're doing pretty well. But certainly things like fragmentation and water quality challenges are going to be huge for the state, and the forests have a pretty big role to play in that.
Keeping an eye on challenges to the state by tracking the health of its ecosystem. The Vermont Monitoring Cooperative has the information it needs to keep going. In Underhill, I'm Rebecca Gollin with Across the Fence.
Thank you, Rebecca. Joining me now are 2 guests. Jim Duncan is the director of the Vermont Monitoring Cooperative, and Sandy Wilmot is the Forest Health Specialist and Climate Change Coordinator with Vermont's Department of Forests, Parks, and Recreation. Thanks so much for coming in. Now, Jim, the Underhill site we saw in the video is just one of about 40 different sites that you monitor across the state. Tell me a little bit about the bigger picture.
Sure. The 40 sites there are specific to looking at the trees and the conditions on those plots, but we're really interested in what we can learn about those plots in the context of forest ecosystems in general. So we're not just looking at the trees, but also all of the components that go into making a forest ecosystem healthy. So we're interested in water quality, air quality, wildlife distributions, and soil health, and how all of those knit together to support a healthy forest in the state of Vermont. Mm-hmm. So those are a key component of the VMC program, in that we provide those monitoring streams, but we are also trying to then provide the holistic understanding and get that information out to all the people who need it, because we are using it at UVM, the state's using it, and then we also need to bring in our federal partners and nonprofits in the state. So the cooperative kind of tries to take those monitoring programs and streams and data, but then also build a group of people who can use that information and support them.
Now, Sandy, part of the big picture is that the partnership is made up of the monitoring cooperative. Tell me a little bit about the role that your department plays in this cooperative.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can think of the Vermont Monitoring Cooperative as the umbrella, and underneath that umbrella are state functions and goals. So it really is a partnership. We're interested in the kinds of management that can really help support healthy forests. Other people are doing research on that, so we glean the information from there. But it really functions because we all have a shared goal, and we just sort of want to get that done together. Initially, the state had data management services, and Now that's flipped over and the university does that. So it really is a cooperative. We share our staff and our ideas and our expertise together to really make it work. And within the agency, some of our other departments have needs for information that can be gathered through this umbrella program as well. So it's a partnership and a cooperation to reach a common goal.
So the Cooperative has 25 years of data. Can you each give us some examples of the kinds of things that Vermonters can find in your database?
Sure. Beyond some of our core long-term monitoring data sets, some of the ones that have been really exciting for people are long-term climate data sets. We have meteorological data out on the lake, which has been really useful for recreationalists. We have a lot of information on bird and wild and amphibian distributions and how they're doing over time, which has been pretty interesting for some people, especially birders, to know the long-term trends on some of these higher elevation places. But we also maintain products that come out of these data. So the annual monitoring reports that we've been publishing take us a year-long worth of data and put it in context of the long-term trends. So these are meant more for a quick consumption. They're not downloading files and trying to work with them yourself, but actually giving you a quick snapshot of what's the state of air quality, what's the state of forest health, or the state of water quality and microorganisms in lakes. So we can give you these kinds of snapshots in a more consumable form. So we have some of those types of content too.
Right, written by all the individual cooperators that are doing the work. And so it's much more digestible for people going on to the website.
Yeah, and a lot of different diverse projects. And over the years, is there something that kind of stands out to either of you as a personal favorite of some of the things that you've worked on?
Sure. I really love this project. It's called Phenology, which is the timing and development in the spring and in the fall of leaf out and then leaf color and drop. And it started as something where we wanted to understand how this insect, pear thrips, got into buds in the spring and did a lot of damage. And now it's extremely useful for talking about changes in climate and how that affects the spring and the fall timing of things. So that's one of my favorites.
And how about for you, Jim?
I would pick the long-term soil monitoring project that we have. It was mentioned on the video, it's supposed to be a 200-year project. So everyone who has started that project knows that they won't get to see it finished. And I think that that's pretty audacious because it takes a lot of effort to keep something going that long. But the information that we're going to get out of that is so critical because soil monitoring is inherently difficult. You can't track changes in soils because they happen over such long times. And so looking at the chemistry and the composition and of soils in these small places over a long period of time, I think is going to be a really interesting study. And I'm excited to be trying to keep that going now, and I hope that somebody gets to keep it going for us when we're gone.
There needs to be a plaque of all your names of people who have done this through the years. People talk about climate change. Is it real? Is it not real? What are you seeing in the woods?
Well, we are seeing a change in the phenology, actually, is a good one to start. You want to
Yeah,
speak to
that's
that
a
one?
good marker, I think. As we see spring coming earlier, the trees leafing out earlier, that pattern is followed with the trees as well as with the climate. And in the fall, same thing, an extension of the growing season, and that's really obvious with our monitoring. It's what people are noticing, and it's nice to have the data kind of back up what's being observed.
The Monitoring Cooperative's annual conference is coming up in early December. Tell our viewers about this year's theme and what they can find out from the conference.
Sure. This year our theme is healthy forests, healthy watersheds. So the goal is to really look at a watershed level view of the forest ecosystem and how management's going to support that watershed. So we have so much forest land that when we deal with managing lands in Vermont, it's about forests. And the goal is to give people information about the types of management that are going on to support watershed health and how they're finding the indicators of change so that if they need to respond to a change in the ecosystem, how can they change their management based on those indicators. So this year we're going to have a panel of people talking about forested buffers, wildlife responses, invasive species, a number of different things that kind of come together when you consider watershed level management of forests.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining us. If folks at home would like more information about the Vermont Monitoring Cooperative, or if you'd like to explore the Cooperative's expansive database, then check the website on your screen. It's uvm.edu/VMC. Thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.